I sat in the front pew of the church, my hands folded neatly in my lap, staring at the polished mahogany coffin at the altar. My mother was inside, a woman I had spent my entire life trying to impress. A woman who, in the end, had made it painfully clear that I was never enough. Tears burned at the edges of my vision, but they weren't for grief, they were for closure, the kind I knew I'd never truly get. Beside me, my sister Lauren sniffled dramatically, dabbing at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. She always had a way of making everything about her, even now. When the priest finished his final blessing, Lauren let out a soft, pitiful sob and leaned against her husband, Ethan, who wrapped a comforting arm around her. She looked flawless, as always. Her designer black dress hugged her figure just right, her blonde curls cascading in elegant waves. Even at a funeral, she managed to be the center of attention. I swallowed the lump in my throat and glanced toward the second row, where my aunt and uncle sat stiffly, avoiding my gaze. The same went for the rest of the family. They knew. They all knew. I had braced myself for what was coming. I had convinced myself I wouldn't care. But nothing could have prepared me for the lawyer's words after the service. "I'm sorry, Hailey," Mr. Watson said, adjusting his glasses as he flipped through the pages of my mother's will. "Your parents left everything to Lauren." A cold numbness spread through me. "Everything?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Yes." He hesitated before adding, "Your parents believed you were independent enough and didn't require financial assistance. Lauren, being a stay-at-home mother, needed the support more." My nails dug into the fabric of my dress. Lauren had 3 properties, a husband who made 6 figures, and luxury cars parked in her driveway. Yet I, who had worked my way through college, juggled 2 jobs, and never once asked my parents for help, had been deemed unworthy. "That's absurd," Aunt Diane muttered under her breath, finally breaking the tense silence. But Lauren didn't look surprised. She simply let out a delicate sigh, as if this was just another unfortunate burden she had to bear. "I mean, it does make sense," she murmured, placing a hand over mine as if offering comfort. "You've always been so independent, Hailey. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me, that's all. That's all." I pulled my hand away. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She bit her lip. They may have mentioned something before." And there it was. The truth. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand how, even after death, my parents still found a way to remind me that I wasn't good enough. But years of being the overlooked daughter had taught me one thing: anger wouldn't change anything. So instead, I smiled. Because if they thought I was independent before, they had no idea what I was capable of now. I turned to the lawyer. "Thank you for your time," I said smoothly, standing up and gathering my purse. "But I won't be contesting the will." Lauren's brow furrowed. "Wait, you're not mad?" I gave her a long, measured look before tilting my head. "Oh, Lore," I murmured, stepping closer so only she could hear. "I don't need their money." Her shoulders sagged in relief, mistaking my words for surrender. I turned on my heel and walked out of that office with my head held high. What Lauren didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had already prepared my own final gift for our dear parents. And it would be unforgettable. I wasn't always invisible to my parents, at least, I don't think I was. There must have been a time, maybe when I was a toddler clutching my mother's skirt or babbling nonsense to my father, when they saw me. When they really saw me. But as I grew older, the difference between me and Lauren became impossible to ignore. She was the golden child. The cherished daughter who could do no wrong. And me? I was the afterthought. It started small. When Lauren won her first dance recital at age 6, my parents threw a party, complete with a cake shaped like ballet slippers. When I placed first in a spelling bee that same year, my mother patted my head and told me to keep up the good work. When Lauren turned 16, she got a brand new car wrapped in a big red bow. When I turned 16, I got a used bike. Because you don't really go out much anyway, Hailey. I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need the approval, the admiration, the love. But deep down, it stung. Still, I worked hard while Lauren breezed through life on charm and parental favoritism. I built something for myself. I worked my way through college with 2 part-time jobs. I landed a stable career in finance. I saved every penny and invested smartly. I never relied on anyone. And yet, in the end, none of it mattered. I sat in my tiny apartment that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over in my head. Your parents left everything to Lauren. Of course they did. Why would I expect anything different? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. A message from Aunt Diane. Hailey, I just want you to know I think what your parents did was disgusting. You deserve better. A second later, another message appeared. You should fight this. Contest the will. It's not fair. Fair. The word made me laugh. Nothing about my relationship with my parents had ever been fair. I had accepted that a long time ago. But what I couldn't accept was Lauren sitting there, pretending this was just another unfortunate inconvenience for her. Pretending she hadn't known. I didn't want their money. But that didn't mean I wouldn't leave my own mark on their legacy. I pulled open my laptop and logged into my email. There was someone I needed to reach out to. A certain lawyer. A week later, I stood in front of my parents' house. No, Lauren's house now. It still smelled the same, freshly cut grass, the lingering scent of my mother's lavender perfume embedded in the walls. But it wasn't home anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. Lauren answered the door, her face lighting up with surprise. Hailey, I wasn't expecting you. No, of course she wasn't. I need to pick up some things, I said simply. Mom had some personal letters and keepsakes I'd like to have. Lauren hesitated, but then stepped aside, waving me in. Of course. Take whatever you need. I walked through the house slowly, memories pressing against me with every step. The living room, where I had watched my parents shower Lauren with praise. The dining table, where I had once sat in silence while they gushed over her latest accomplishments. I headed toward my father's old study. This was what I had come for. I pulled open the desk drawer, fingers grazing over old documents, notebooks, and letters. And then I found it. The original copy of my parents' will. I had already seen the one the lawyer had read aloud. But this was different. Because there, on the first page, was a clause that hadn't been in the final document. A clause stating that my parents' estate was supposed to be split evenly between Lauren and me. I let out a slow breath, my fingers tightening around the paper. So Lauren had done more than just accept the favoritism. She had changed the will. I turned, my heart pounding. Lauren stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, her voice calm. Almost bored. I stared at her, waiting for an explanation. A confession. Anything. Instead, she just shrugged. Mom and Dad always intended for me to have everything, Hailey. I just made sure their wishes were properly carried out. I had never hated her more. I could have screamed. Could have fought. Could have marched straight to a lawyer and exposed her for what she'd done. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steady. That's all I needed to know. And with that, I walked out of the house, already planning my next move. Because Lauren had just made one very big mistake. She thought I would let this go. She thought I was the same girl who had always been overlooked. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The truth had been sitting right there, buried in my father's desk, waiting for me to find it. My parents had intended to split their estate between Lauren and me. But Lauren had made sure that never happened. She hadn't just accepted her role as the golden child, she had taken everything, ensuring I walked away with nothing. She thought I would do what I'd always done. Accept it. Swallow it. Move on. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I spent the next week planning. I could have gone straight to a lawyer, could have fought the will in court. But legal battles were messy and slow. And Lauren, she was careful. By now, I had no doubt she had covered her tracks. No, this required something different. Something that would hit her where it really hurt. I just needed the right person to help me. I found him in an old bar downtown, the kind with dim lighting and the faint scent of whiskey soaked into the wooden walls. Hello, Ethan, I said, sliding into the booth across from Lauren's husband. Ethan looked up, startled. He wasn't expecting me. Hailey? He frowned, setting down his drink. What are you doing here? I folded my hands on the table. I know about the will. His entire body went still. What? I leaned in, keeping my voice low. I know Lauren changed it. I found the version in Dad's study. My parents wanted me to have half of everything, but Lauren made sure that didn't happen. Ethan let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his face. He didn't look surprised. You knew, I said. It wasn't a question. He sighed. I had my suspicions. He paused, staring at his glass. But Lauren, she controls everything. The finances, the house, the accounts. I don't ask questions anymore. Of course, he didn't. Lauren had always been the dominant one in their marriage. He was just along for the ride. But I wasn't here to judge Ethan. I was here to use him. Listen, I said, my voice softening. I don't care about the money. I never have. Ethan snorted. Lauren thinks you do. Lauren thinks a lot of things, I said. But she's wrong. I leaned forward. I don't want her money. I just want her to pay for what she did. Ethan studied me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. God, I'd love to see that, he muttered, shaking his head. But Lauren, she always wins, Hailey. She's untouchable. Not this time, I said. Because I knew something Lauren didn't. And I was about to use it. Over the next week, I dug deep into Lauren's perfect life. I wasn't interested in her bank statements or property deeds. I wanted something else. Something personal. And it didn't take long to find it. Late one night, scrolling through old social media posts, I saw it, a picture from 3 years ago. A vacation Lauren had taken to Italy with a group of friends. The problem? Ethan had never been on that trip. I clicked on the tagged names. One stood out. A man named Daniel Carter. He wasn't just a friend. He was something much more. I scrolled through his account, clicking through old comments and interactions. And there it was. A thread of flirtatious remarks, inside jokes, late-night messages spanning years. Lauren had been cheating on Ethan. And she was sloppy about it. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. This was it. My first move. The beauty of revenge wasn't always in the grand act. Sometimes it was in the subtle unraveling. I drafted a message and sent it to Ethan. No words, no explanation. Just screenshots. The reply came almost instantly. Where did you get these? Does it matter? I typed back. You deserve to know the truth. A long pause. Then, meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. I smiled. Checkmate, Lauren. The next evening, I met Ethan at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the table. The moment he looked up and saw me, I knew he had seen everything. I slid into the chair across from him, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with something fragile. Anger, disbelief, maybe even relief. How long? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. I exhaled. From what I found, at least 4 years. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course. He picked up his coffee, but his hands were shaking too much to take a sip. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said. And for once, I actually meant it. No, you're not. His eyes locked onto mine. You wanted me to know. You wanted this to happen. I didn't deny it. Yes, but only because Lauren deserved to be exposed. Exposed? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. And now what? What do you want from me, Hailey? I leaned forward. I don't want your money. I don't want your sympathy. I just want to watch her world fall apart. Ethan studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a small, dark smile curved his lips. You're not the only one. We sat there for nearly an hour, going over every detail. Lauren's manipulations. Her lies. The fake will. Ethan was angry, but not in a volatile way. No, his anger was colder. Controlled. The kind of anger that led to devastation. I want a divorce, he said finally, his voice steady. And I want full custody of the kids. It was a bold move, A calculated strike. Lauren had spent years curating the perfect image, a loving wife, a devoted mother. She needed that image. And Ethan? He was about to rip it away from her. The next morning, I watched from a safe distance as Ethan's lawyer delivered the divorce papers to Lauren's doorstep. She answered in a silk robe, hair perfectly styled, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. But the moment she saw the envelope, her face twisted into something ugly. I wished I could hear her reaction. The shock, the panic. Instead, I just watched as her fingers tightened around the papers, knuckles white. And then, just for a moment, she glanced around. Not at Ethan, not at her kids, but at the neighbors. She cared more about what they thought than the fact that her marriage was crumbling right in front of her. Classic Lauren. I should have walked away after that. Let Ethan handle the rest. But I wasn't finished. Lauren still thought she could control the narrative. That she could manipulate her way out of this the way she always had. She was wrong. That evening, I made sure of it. With a few clicks, I uploaded the proof of her affair. Screenshots, messages, pictures. But I didn't send them to Ethan. I sent them to her entire social circle, her mommy group chats, the charity board members, even the homeowners association, everyone who mattered to her. The fallout was immediate. Lauren's phone blew up with calls and messages. She tried to deny it at first. Tried to spin some kind of misunderstanding. But there was too much evidence. By the next morning, she was a pariah. The friends she had spent years cultivating now wanted nothing to do with her. And for the first time in her life, Lauren was alone. The thing about people like Lauren is that they never believe consequences apply to them. They lie, manipulate, and twist the truth to fit their version of reality. They believe they're untouchable. That no matter what they do, things will always work out in their favor. But not this time. I made sure of that. A week after I sent out the evidence of her affair, Lauren was spiraling. Her once loyal friends had cut her off. The school moms whispered behind her back at drop-offs. The charity board, where she once reigned supreme, had asked her to step down. And worst of all, Ethan had moved out, taking the kids with him. She had lost everything. But Lauren wasn't the kind of person to go down quietly. No, she still had one last move to play. I was at work when she called me. I debated ignoring it, letting her stew in the mess she'd made. But something inside me wanted to hear what she had to say. I answered on the third ring. You ruined my life. Her voice was raw, almost unrecognizable. No, Lauren, I said calmly. You did that all on your own. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won. I don't need to win, I replied. I just needed the truth to come out. She was silent for a long moment. Then, her voice dropped to something colder. You don't understand, Hailey. You think you've taken everything from me? Fine, but you better watch your back. Because I have nothing left to lose. And with that, she hung up. A normal person might have been scared. But I knew Lauren. She was all talk. Still, I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not yet. Because Lauren might have lost her reputation, her marriage, and her perfect image. But there was still one thing left. The house. I didn't need the money. But I did need to finish what I started. So I called Ethan. Do you still have the original will? I asked. Yeah, he said, confusion in his voice. Why? I smiled. Because it's time to fix what Lauren broke. It took a few more weeks, but eventually my lawyer filed the case. Lauren had fraudulently altered legal documents, a serious crime. There was more than enough proof. And with Ethan's statement, she didn't stand a chance. The court ruled in my favor. My parents' original wishes were reinstated, which meant half of everything, including the house, now belonged to me. I'll never forget the look on Lauren's face when the sheriff showed up with the eviction notice. You can't do this, she screamed, her voice shrill with rage. This is my house. Not anymore, I said, standing in the doorway. You took everything from me, Lauren. And now I'm just taking back what was mine. She was shaking, her hands clenched into fists. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered, eyes desperate. I tilted my head. I guess you'll have to be independent now. And then, with the sweetest smile I could muster, I handed her one last gift. An old, used bicycle. The same kind my parents gave me for my 16th birthday. I walked back inside and shut the door, leaving her standing there, alone, for the first time in her life. The house was quiet for the first time in years. I walked through its halls without feeling like an outsider. No more judgmental stares. No more whispered conversations about how different I was from Lauren. It was mine now, not just legally, but in every way that mattered. Yet, as I stood in the grand living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and perfectly curated decor, I felt nothing. This place had never been a home to me. It had been a battleground, a symbol of everything I had been denied. And I knew what I had to do next. I put the house on the market the very next day. Not for profit, not for revenge, but because I wanted a clean slate. This house had been Lauren's kingdom, my parents' shrine to their perfect daughter, and I wanted no part of it. I watched from a distance as the for sale sign was hammered into the lawn. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was winning. Lauren, on the other hand, wasn't faring so well. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was struggling. Ethan had one full custody, and without him to bankroll her lifestyle, things unraveled fast. The last time I saw her, she was renting a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, working a low-level job she despised. And for once, there was no safety net. No parents to bail her out. No adoring social circle to prop her up. She was finally living the kind of life she had always looked down on. But the funny thing? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I just felt done. The money I received from my parents' estate? I donated most of it. Not out of spite, but because I had built my life without their help. And I didn't need their wealth to define me. I kept enough to start over somewhere new. A different city. A different life. One where I wasn't Hailey, the forgotten daughter. Just Hailey. A week before I left town, Aunt Diane invited me over for dinner. She had been the only relative who truly stood by me through everything. As we sat at the table, she reached for my hand. "You know," she said, smiling softly, "your parents were wrong about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh!" "They always thought you were the one who didn't need them. That you were too strong. Too independent. But the truth is, they needed you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "They built their entire world around Lauren because she needed to be propped up. She needed their validation, their money, their constant approval. But you? You thrived despite them. And that scared them." The words settled deep inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe my parents hadn't ignored me because I wasn't good enough. Maybe they ignored me because they knew I didn't need them the way Lauren did. And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. That night, as I packed the last of my things, I took one last look around my old room. The girl who used to live here, the one who spent years trying to prove she was worthy, was gone. In her place was a woman who had nothing left to prove. I picked up my bags, walked out the door, and never looked back. Because my past didn't define me. My future did.